Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Top Employer Institute's webinar on designing work in the age of agentic AI, basically answering your question on when AI runs the workflow, what HR leaders need to do next. I'm sure this is a topic that you're hearing, talking about left, right, and center. But what we can promise for today's webinar is that we will be looking at your burning questions and we will be bringing some real life examples of what we're seeing on the ground. And to help me do that, I do have my lovely colleague, Jake, on the call with me. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Amara Naeem. I'm the Director of Client Experience at Top Employers Institute. My team does take care of client experience as well as client success and advisory. But I could not be happier to share this webinar with Jake. And I'll let you, Jake, introduce yourself because there's a lot to unpack there.
Thanks, Amara. Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Jake Canal. I head up the Americas for Top Employers Institute, serve on the senior leadership team, and have the opportunity to work with chief people officers and their incredible teams across North America and Latin America primarily. So thanks for having me today. We've got a good agenda for you. We're going to kind of break it up into 10-minute chunks and tackle the 3 questions you would have seen in the description of this webinar. Before we do that, though, I'm personally calling in from my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. Would love to hear where folks are calling in from. Drop it in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from. Amara, you're in Amsterdam today? You're all over the world. Where are you?
Well, today I'm in Amsterdam, the home base. So,
Okay,
well, tomorrow is a different story.
Okay, awesome. All right, we got Brussels, Belgium, UK coming in. All right, nice.
Great.
Italy, nice. Prague.
Oh, it's great to see how global audience we have.
There we go. Charlotte, North Carolina, represent. Italy, nice. Good to see you all. Mexico, there we go.
Mexico.
Americas. All right, team. Good to see more flowing in. Good to see we got some global diversity in here. So the agenda for today, what are we going to do? 3 questions that we're going to explore together. First, we're going to talk about the returns on investment with using AI, right? How are organizations making sure they're seeing real returns? What are some of the ones that are succeeding the most doing differently? That's a question we'll answer. 2 is then we'll move to roles, rewards, and leadership. As AI agents take on more of the execution layer, how are you redesigning roles, not just applying, but redesigning rewards and leadership for a world that is looking fundamentally different? And then last but not least, probably the most important on the page, ethics as an advantage. What does it take to build ethical foundations, become a source of competitive advantage through those ethics and not just a compliance requirement? So Amara and I have a little bit of a rhythm set for you. We're going to start by talking about what's the pain we're observing for HR leaders that we see from our seats and conversations we have every single day. Okay, we talk to hundreds, probably a week each in different parts of the world. 2 is then we'll talk about what some of the data is sharing from our data report. Amara will take you through that. And I actually taught a cohort earlier this year of 20 HR execs on how to build their own AI agents and the skills involved in that. So I'll have a couple takes from the cohort that I include along the way. But without further ado, if you don't know Top Employers Institute today, we exist to build a better world of work. Okay, we have one global certification methodology that we apply to more than 2,500 organizations where we audit and certify people practices and do 2 things with those. 1, link them to business outcomes that matter for the organization, like employee engagement, retention, profitability, revenue growth. And 2, connect it to your employer brand. So what you say you do matches the audit of what you actually do. And that creates more value for your people, your business, and your customers. You can see we work with orgs at individual country levels. That's the red seal up above. On regional levels, that's the blue seal globally, and then at the enterprise level. And these are just a handful of the brands we represent. But we have a lot of data, over 1 million data points. And so we have a lot of interesting and unique perspective to bring to this discussion on a global level. I'd say the other way we measure our impact is also by the number of employees that work for certified top employers. So today it's actually up to 14.3 million globally. We're not done yet. We're just getting started, but looking forward to seeing more participate to not only join the benchmark, but also improve the lives of employees around the world. So Amara, first question, what's happening in the world with AI? Talk to us.
Well, probably like a super interesting question. So before we get into the nitty gritty and like really interesting stuff, practically, let's just look at, hey, what's really happening, right? Just to share a couple things. A few months ago, the Prime Minister of Albania appointed the first AI minister for their cabinet, and the objective was that she's going to be corruption proof. You can't bribe her, you can't, threat her, you can't make her do things and stuff like that. So it just kind of like blows your mind as well. Like, okay, this is something that was probably like we'd see in movies and in TV shows, etc. So kind of like moving in that direction. But then at the same time, there's like this reality of tokens, which like I think a couple of months ago we were not really talking about enough. But now it's literally like become a competitive advantage for employers. Like their candidates, especially in the tech field, are now asking that as the first question. So it's going from like, do you offer remote work to do you offer tokens, or how many tokens do I get if I start working with you? So that picture is changing. At the same time, companies are heavily, heavily, heavily investing into AI, and at the same time, a little bit underestimating that budget. We take the example of Uber. I'm sure you all have heard or read about it. They kind of ran out of their AI budget in the first 4 months of using it. So like, first the proud announcement or the figure used was 95% of our engineers are using AI now. And well, then voila, 4 months later, we ran out of the budget. So kind of have to go back to the drawing board again. So lots happening on different levels, different layers, and it's quite interesting to observe all these trends, right? Just keep those in the back of our mind before we go into what's coming up next. So where are we today if we look at the research, the real numbers? So going from overarching picture to what's really happening, what we're also noticing is that the adoption of AI tools was perhaps faster than the value delivery of it. So if you look at it, traditionally, any technology would have taken like 7 to 12 months to show some kind of return on investment. Whereas for AI, it's predicted to take 2 to 4 years. Now that's a statement, right? Like all those big investments going into it, waiting 2 to 4 years. So that's one angle, right? And then we're also seeing like 95% of AI developments are, developments are there, the technology is there, but workforce readiness isn't. So it kind of goes hand in hand, right? Like you can have the technology in place, but if your workforce isn't adopting it, if they aren't ready to move forward with it, that begs the question, what's happening there? And the third bit here is that 93, Jake, I love that you put it as like 93.7 kind of rule, which is a little bit catchier than I would have imagined it. But 93% of AI budgets, if they're going to technology, only 7% of people are expected to use it. So when you look at all of this, it does make you think, again, on different levels. And I'm not sort of going into one direction or another. It's simply to show you what's actually happening in the market, on the ground, around the world kind of situation before we start our discussion, really. But the most interesting part here on this slide probably is the split in the trust. When we look at the employee population and we look at the leaders and compare them, only 1 in 4 frontline workers feel supported by their leadership in terms of AI. At the same time, those same leaders are twice more likely to say that AI will accelerate their own careers. So there's a little bit of like, different sort of things happening in parallel for the employees when compared to the leaders themselves. So the moral of the story here is that the real challenge probably hasn't been the adoption, because people are maybe willing to adopt it. It is how everything has been designed. And that's going to be the cornerstone of what we have found through our research at Top Employers Institute and where this discussion will go moving forward. So having said that context, Jake, I'll come to you and ask that question. The first one, how do you see returns, and what do the leaders that actually do see those returns do differently? Let's start out with that one first.
Yeah, sounds good, Amar. So I mean, a chief people officer asked me a couple of weeks ago. They said, Some of the use cases for AI are too specific that it's not related to my job day to day. It's just too specific in the weeds. And there were two examples, right, where Amar, what you just said came to life. One is the fact that right now AI is most useful in two different contexts. Okay, either you're using it for a very specific use case that day to day you may or may not be doing, but you need to do it to build the skill, right? To understand the power. That's one example. The other example on the opposite end of the spectrum is AI has all of your context. It's got all of the things you work with, you have access to, which I'm guessing isn't likely for many of you. Maybe you're on that journey. Maybe you have some access, but not all the context, right? And so the gap Amar just talked about is there's a lot of investment in the tooling itself, but the skill building itself is the thing that's kind of taking a back seat, or the time, effort, design behind it. So, so within that, right, what did we find? What are we finding? I would say what we're finding is that HR leaders feel that there are elements of work that can be automated and can't be, right? We saw that the elements of work that were coming to life most often in teaching folks how to build agents was highly administrative, data-heavy work that consolidates tens, hundreds, or thousands of files and data points over the course of many different places. Okay, so this is the example of saying, hey, I have all these disparate systems and disparate data sources. How can I actually make more informed choices by stitching them together? Whether I'm a manufacturing company and I'm trying to plan for capacity at my plants, so I need to tie capacity to my hiring plan, right? Or I'm a technology services company and we're getting ready to go through a new sales hiring and onboarding system or process. And we need to understand how we're going to drive behavioral competency-based hiring across the organization, right? Both cases, very different, but there are lots of data sources that go into each of those. And so the pain comes to, how do I stitch those together? And traditionally what used to take me hours, weeks, months, or never, in reality, into something that I can realize value from, not in 2 to 4 years, but if I can stitch the right context together and train something in an afternoon, it will save me weeks or hours in the next month, right? So that's kind of the pain we started with. But moving from there, I know we have research on our side as well, Mara. So
yeah. What we are also finding is that only 1 in 3 CEOs are actually reporting that they see actual returns from AI, and more than half actually see little to no upside yet. So the returns are real, but only where the work was redesigned. And what I mean by that is you can't just take AI and start throwing at it whatever problems you're facing in your organization and expect it's going to solve your problems magically, right? The real magic happens when you start to redesign the workflows around it. So the whole work has to be redesigned for it to really work. So go after, like you mentioned, Jake, the specific use cases. That's really like almost like a starting point, because you need to know what the problem is, where the friction is, and what you're trying to solve before you start applying AI to it. Because it's not it can accentuate something that you're doing well. Otherwise, it's not gonna like magically make sure that all your problems are gonna go away. At the same time, what we see that organizations that are seeing some success with it, and especially seeing returns with using AI, it's a very simple fact. They're also investing in people. They're taking their people along with it. So it's that whole employee involvement piece that matters more than I think many organizations realize. Because again, like I said, it's not going to magically solve problems for a company, right? And another thing so there are 3 factors, right? So don't just start sort of throwing it on everything without realizing what is it actually that you're trying to achieve. Second is involving the employees in that design of work. And the third bit becomes really evaluating it and sharing the quick wins, like the early wins, that gives people the perception and the comfort of knowing that something is working. And it doesn't need to be like a major, like millions of euros in return on investment. It can start with something very basic, because there's always a starting point. And then build on it from there. If you've got your people on board, that it becomes like a different equation than when you don't. One example, like a specific example that we've seen with a top employer, comes from Yum China, and these are people who are also operating KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and all the great stuff that most of us enjoy in China. And something that they did really well, I think it's a beautiful example of really operationalizing AI into the workflows. At the same time, what they had done was made sure that the role of a human manager is clear and visible. So that's also what I mean, taking people along with you, right? It's about the clarity that you give them. It's not about AI is going to do everything, but where does the human judgment come in? Of course, the human judgment is going to move upstream. And yes, it will take over all the admin repeatable stuff. Like in this example, all the admin stuff, the repeatable, like scheduling, inventory management, operational checks, all those things that were taking up a bunch of managers' time, they were taken over by the AI embedded into those workflows. And guess what it resulted in? It gave the managers enough time to then actually do that human role of coaching their teams. And that, I think, is a superb example of how to do this right. And another thing that they did really well was, like I said, taking the employees with you. They made clear effort to involve employees in shaping how the AI is used. So they had these almost like a hackathon dedicated to innovation. They put in this innovation fund, so where employees could actually contribute their ideas and improvements. So that completely changes the ball game, right? Because then everybody becomes a part of that change that's taking place within the organization, and it's not just, oh, it's going to take away my job kind of situation. So people see where the system adds value, and they understand their own role still matters, and how it matters, and how do they actually influence the way business is moving forward. So I love that example. I know you've seen something really amazing in the cohort you worked with as well, Jake. So would love to complement that here.
Yeah, there was. I think the takeaway. Look, team. There's many things that in the name of redesigning work, there's many things that are painful about our jobs today. And just because it's painful doesn't necessarily mean we should apply AI to it, but we should consider: do I have data sources or clean data sources where if I did apply AI here, it could be helpful? And so we were looking at a number of use cases where HR execs were defining and identifying specific example use cases that they encountered on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and basically just mapped out how their time is spent on their calendar and said, hey, this thing takes me 40 hours a week. How could we get it to a place where maybe it could take me, not 40 hours a week. That's actually the job. 40 hours or a year. How can we get it to a place where it's 10 to 15 minutes, right? And so one of the realizations one of the HR execs had was that they actually had all the data in front of them. The place that they needed a protection was security, right? And understanding how to process that data in a secure way that is compliant, that follows a governance model in an ethical way. And so for the cohort to build the skills, we use synthetic data, right? Fake data sets that basically replicated what real ones would look like in real life, like the access piece. So the example here was this HR exec said, give me the top 5 actions by ROI, low cost, high impact. I don't want 30 things I can do. What can we start doing next week right away? And what they included in here was turnover data, employee engagement data. They also had their top employers institute data set. So we're measuring the consistency of people practices. Okay, so they were mapping up both employee engagement to their people practices and looking where's the delta between those things. But the pattern across folks realized throughout was there's already stuff they've paid for that they don't have to go get another tool for. It's much cheaper to deploy AI in smaller use cases. It'll take minutes, not weeks, months, or years. You can do it fast, as you all know. And then the outputs that start to come from these things make you realize the outputs that you have start to be outputs that are now from sub agents serving a potential kind of master agent that's stitching something together. So then the creativity comes where you can say, oh, wow, if I have this one responding to this question for me on this problem and use case, and I have this one responding to this question for me on this problem and use case, well, then how can I stitch those together from multi-agent chains, right, of sources and data? And that's where it starts to get fun. That's where you start to wonder, oh, I wonder if I can go to the beach next week, actually, because so not full automation, but this is what you'll hear me talk about in a sec, kind of the orchestration layer. But for the sake of time, we can keep moving.
Yeah, but I did have a comment on that, Jake. Like the Achilles heel of HR has always been all that manual work, right? The Excels, the documents and the decks, and a lot of things sitting in 10,000 different places. But to be able to bring it all together, that right there is, I mean, for me, I would say like it's a game changer, right? Because then you don't have to manually update the data systems and look for like, oh, I saved version 25 somewhere on some file in some folder that I can't find anymore. So that in itself, but the foundations of how we do HR is quite impactful.
Yeah, it's fun. It's the use case in breaking the mindset of like how we used to think and how we do work in the past 10, 20, 30 years versus how we'll do it in the next 10, 20, 32, Amara. Really basic example was what you just mentioned, which is the folks were like, hey, I've got all this data, but I need to, before I use it with AI, I need to go make sure I clean this data source up. And it's like, well, actually, why don't you just have AI help you clean it up? It'll recognize it'll distill down 10,000 rows to say, here are the 3 things you're missing from these boxes. What are they? Like, oh, great. Right. So I think it's also changing your mindset and how you would approach that problem. And that's where the design comes in. So you can see some of the elements and takeaways here, but start with painful tasks. Start where you already have data.
Right? Where it hurts. Stop where it hurts.
If you solve it, you'll have tears of joy. Those are the that we started with too, and it worked really well in adopting. People respond to that. And then, as Amara said, design for trust, involve people early, and continuously evaluate impact, right, when thinking about ROI.
Yeah.
Cool. So here's the next question. Yeah.
The next one is also quite interesting, I think, because it's also one of the things that we keep hearing from our clients and everything, like when agents are basically running the execution layer, where is the human in the big picture? And you talk about roles, rewards, and leadership. That's the whole ecosystem that gets impacted in a way, right? So tell us, start us off with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would say there was this bigger question that was asked in the cohort by an HR exec at a 40,000 person company. About half their business is in the Americas, half their business is in Asia Pacific, primarily China, and the US across those. And I'll take you to the right side of this. One of the things he shared was, he said, I'm having trouble visualizing something big that can move the needle for HR. And I'm not trying to be a naysayer for the impact of AI, but it's more personal productivity. What are the use cases that actually reduce either overhead or churn or cost? Like we're saying it can be applied to all these things and we can do more with less humans, blah, blah, blah. But give me the actual practical examples of how this is happening. And it's funny because we didn't have an answer for that, right? I mean, this stuff is like AI is changing so often every week. And you would have seen, obviously, Sam Altman and Dario Amodei, right, sharing the kind of narrative last year on the white collar job apocalypse, right, coming. That has now since been backed up a little bit, because what people are starting to realize is, number one, it's the sum of individual use cases that leads to broader productivity. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes there are broader productivity things you can operationalize and then drive through an organization, and you all can follow that flow. That's a workflow thing that's already existed. Applying AI to workflows is happening naturally. Okay. But the other piece is what you unlock when you unlock the productivity of the collection of individuals using AI, right, for individual use cases, and what that productivity equals. So what people start to realize is, oh my gosh, now I can get more done with people. I might have to hire some more people. Like,
Exactly.
these people can only send 400 emails a day. I need more human beings behind this thing so that people connect. So it's kind of it's been an interesting cycle to watch
Yeah.
flow. And the productivity game is a bit different than the people growth game, but they are connected. So it's been
But I
interesting seeing
do
that.
think that's been like the question, right? Like on individual level, people are using it within
Right.
the organization, but how do we move it on organizational level?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
100%.
happens?
Like,
What happens there?
Mark, back to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things I think the most interesting thing that has come out of our one of the most interesting things that has come out is the rise of the role of an AI orchestrator, and I'm not talking about the software orchestration. This is generally like somebody who's a generalist and uses AI to operate like a small team. And it's not defined by deep expertise in a single area, but rather it's someone who can move across domains and build workflows and use systems around him or her to translate that into the execution phase very quickly. So in practice, you can say it's kind of like an individual contributor, but operating like a small team instead of like an individual contributor. So if you keep that in mind and think about the fact that the output is no longer really from a function or a role or even experience, it's literally shaped by how effectively a person can combine his or her own capability with the systems around them. And once that starts to happen, some of the very basic assumptions in HR begin to break down a little bit because you can no longer compare the roles in the same way. Performance becomes harder because it's very easy to say, like, oh, it's an account manager is going to sit on this benchmark, on this level, yada, yada. And, client success is going to be here. And, a business development person is going to be here. That sort of like is not kind of not relevant anymore. So it becomes difficult to compare. It becomes difficult how you measure performance when we're moving from like roles contributing to like outcomes become the contributing factors to the business. So this is where we move the conversation beyond tools, and it really becomes a question of how would you within your organization define contribution. So there's lots happening in that space as well. Vodacom is one of the examples among top employers where what they've done is to get that bandwagon going, like Jake, what you were saying, to get moving towards that collective productivity. They're literally positioning it as democratizing. I can't pronounce my words today. AI within their organization, and what it started out with like this very simple citizen developer program where the employees were given guardrails and certain objectives, and within that they could come up with solutions. And it has now evolved to like this agentic AI community sort of thing where we're looking at employees really without any coding experience coming up with different solutions for their own domains and really contributing to how the organization is moving forward. Already they've translated this into millions of productivity gains for Vodacom. So it's happening, it's coming. It's just some organizations are catching up, but it's definitely on its way.
Awesome. Yeah, this is another example from the cohort of Mara to kind of share and show. Someone said, my HR function is myself and one colleague. We own the entire integration, onboarding, comp, equity, policy, harmonization, manager, coaching, culture, with no extra headcount.
I don't want that person's job, but okay.
Well, it's interesting. So this, I believe this person is in the biotech space, right? So biotech, pharmaceutical, super interesting space because typically you can have a small organization, 250, 500 employees, right, in that mid-size, and you could be $1 billion in revenue and have, hundreds of millions in funding to go solve a complex healthcare issue with an interesting and new drug, right? And this is also like there's a lot of positive outcomes from this for these companies. And the interesting thing was, while they're a nimble team, resources weren't necessarily scarce, but they do deal with compliance, right? The compliance issues and challenges. So what they used in this case was building a skill set for how they could design a business case for ways they could use AI in their organization. They use synthetic data, so fake data sets, to do this, to build the skill. But what they did was they built a chain of 7 different agents. So an exec dashboard, capacity risk, capability gaps, 3 workforce planning scenarios, flight risk and succession planning, and did it into a 14 slide kind of CHRO brief across, in this case, it was 562 employees. To do that, right, traditionally, just to get a view on having an informed position on where you might be heading strategically would have taken a lot longer in the past 3-4 weeks, right? But then they did it super fast, right? It was like a day. The context, though, was what mattered. So they built the shell for what they could now go collect context on, right? So now they have it. Now they can go apply within getting their IT team on board and saying, like, here's where we want to go. There are other cohort execs on the right side. You can see chained 4 agents together to position HR strategic partner in a big change that was coming. There was one org change agent happening, and it planned an announcement. It planned like even a stabilization communication plan thereafter, which it didn't actually ask for. So it was like, hey, here's like an example. None of this was autonomous. It was all based on the human asking for these things. But then the through line, you can see down on the bottom right, the value moved from reducing output to coordinating systems and applying judgment. And so what I want to kind of mention here is just to say that orchestration layer is super important, and the expectation of fully autonomous AI in the context of work should never be considered at this point when it comes to those key judgment areas, right? And I was talking with an AI CEO that I'm friends with, and he was telling me he gave feedback to someone on their team that they were using AI too much to write emails. And they were like, we might be an AI company, but we appreciate and value human taste over all else. And so choose and select what should be in there versus what should not, because some of it just doesn't make sense, right? There is some slop in there. Right.
Yeah, no, precisely. And you also start to hear comments like, can you please declawed it?
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely there. I mean, and what we found on our research was precisely this, right? What you're saying, that orchestration layer bit, you need to start thinking about it. So it's about coordinating AI and not just tasks anymore, and moving beyond the execution, because execution can probably be done by AI. When you think about humans, you need to start thinking about where decision making happens and where the judgment calls are made. That's where the human needs to come in. And that enables you to also redesign how you measure and reward performance, because you're not looking at traditional roles anymore. You can't compare them any longer. So start with recognizing the impact that is needed and that is created, and where that decision making would lead, that judgment will lead to that required outcome. That's what's going to be the baseline for recognizing contributions. At the same time, we need to acknowledge and start working on the simple notion, and a very foundational notion, that we are looking at a human AI workforce now. So you need to take that digital labor aspect along with the human roles, and the scenario planning that happens and the skills allocation that happens. It's not just humans anymore. So when you're looking at your org chart, when you're doing your talent reviews, even I would go as far as saying that whose output is where, and what skills are needed by AI, by your agents, and by the humans working for you. So the human AI aspect needs to be in your thinking now, like today on. There's no two ways around it, basically. That also leads us to the last question we've got here, and a very, very important one. How do ethical foundations actually become a competitive advantage and not just like a compliance exercise?
Yeah, this is one that was really interesting. We had our head of IT actually join the cohort as a guest speaker at one point, Hida, and we just rolled out agentic AI throughout our organization, I guess a month ago or so now, and seeing a lot of positive adoption, a lot of use cases being applied. But the question that kept coming up, the biggest one, was governance. Who governs this? When do we let people build their own? When do you let employees build, and when don't you? How do we, get away from agent sprawl? Like, we have too many agents, who's owning and maintaining each one? Is there an over provisioning when you give like CFO or CHRO access to an agent? Does that mean now they have full access to the data at that level, right? There's all these different things and considerations where you want to mitigate risk, but also you want to do it with an ethical foundation. So there are kind of these, I'll talk about kind of these 6 questions you can ask your AI providers or technology partners that you can ask them when you're going through potential buying cycles with them, and when maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. But this was one that just kept coming up over and over again. So Mar, do you want to talk through some of the research, and I can bring us
on? This is one of my favorite things actually that we've put out recently, and that's the ethical AI framework. Because again, you can't do without this, right? The whole governance and the questions that are prompted because of that, like who owns the output, who owns if the agent fails, who owns the training of it, and all that stuff. What we found was what really works within our framework are a couple of things. So the organizations that have an ethical AI framework in place are actually more change ready compared to those that don't. And they're also the ones who are continuously and regularly evaluating that human AI impact on their business. So it's kind of like becoming part of the habit, rather than you do something like once in a blue moon, or like, yeah, okay, now it's time for like budget, so I'm also going to do this evaluation kind of thing. But it's just built into your DNA kind of situation. And they engage employees in the AI ethics that govern how AI is deployed, how AI is used within that specific organization, right? And the USD example, USD is a digital transformation business, has about 30,000 employees worldwide. And what I really liked about how they're doing this is they're not looking at it as like a standalone thing that happens. And the governance is not treated as a control mechanism. It's integrated into how innovation actually happens within their business. So ethics, transparency, and accountability are embedded into their AI practices right from the get-go. And that's important, right? Because ethical AI shouldn't slow down innovation. But if it's like part of how you practice something, it becomes a moot point. So it's not going to be like, oh, hey, by the way, we need to think about this now. It's just how we do things. It's just part of how we look at everything that we do. It's just part of how we run innovation. And I think that's something to take inspiration from, for everybody to keep in mind as we move forward.
It's a good point, Mara.
Jake, you've got something from the cohort as well. Would love to hear.
Yeah, sure. Let me pull that up. Yeah, I mean, so these were some of the practical things that we learned from Hida, as well as our head of IT, as we were talking to these HR execs across the board, different industries. On the left side, practical path to governance here, audit, right? The first thing we did at our org, and these orgs are doing as well, survey what tools people actually use without judgment, just so you can get visibility on what's happening out there, because you would be scarily surprised about how much data someone might be able to find about your business just by putting together what seems like seemingly harmless data that's being stitched out there across different roles, places, locations, right? So just something to consider. The next thing is, once you do that, there are the 3 principles of the ethical AI framework that we have a research piece on. So if you're curious about it, we'll make sure you have that link following this on the ethical AI framework, or go to our website and look at our research. You'll see it there. But there are 3 principles there: human centricity, evidence-backed, and long-term lens. To get started, start there if you don't have one yet. And then use cases, apply the principle to the agents you just built. So we had the cohort built an AI governance agent. So its job was to say, hey, we know we just built these things, but like run them through the process to say, can we actually use them? That's in accordance with our framework. And so there are kind of those 6 questions I referenced for vendors. So you might have heard the latest rage amongst the AI engineering community, and apologies for the sirens in the background if you hear them, the authentic New York experience. But the AI harness is gaining in popularity. And what is an AI harness? Well, an AI harness is the value of basically companies that are AI tech companies, right? And so there are 6 kind of questions, 6 elements that make them valuable in the AI harness. One is the instructions they give to a specific agent. So think of like the model sitting at the center, the LLM that's being rented. That's your Claude, that's your OpenAI, that's your Gemini, that's the model, right? With around that are things like instructions that you give the model, context that you train the model on, tools that you might like, hey, give me a heat map or give me a PowerPoint or give me something like a map. Those are specific tools. Then there are guardrails of what not to do. Don't say this, don't do this. And then there's an escalation path and human oversight. So those 6 different layers surrounding an LLM are actually the thing that give AI companies value, because typically they have context that no one else has written down, and they might have instructions and guardrails that are more nuanced. So they have full engineering teams built to keep building out skills, tools, context, and keep building those out. That's what's creating value in an AI company. So your goal is to say and understand what are those things, right? To see if it's something that you can personally take on and solve a problem yourself for far less, or if there really is a lot of value there, you'll see it and you'll know it. So just wanted to call that out.
No, rightly so. That's a good transition into what we also talk about when building the framework for your organization in terms of ethical AI. It is to define those guardrails and do that with your employees as well. Never underestimate what they know and what they're experimenting with. So if you build it kind of together with them, it does give you much more value than just without them. And the evaluation impact over time, we are not living in a world anymore where once a year evaluation of anything works. So it's almost like agility is kind of getting built into everything, into our systems, into our whole ecosystem organically somehow. And you can't move away from that. So that evaluation of impact over time just needs to happen. And most importantly, I think leading with values. Because whether you're building an agent or, deploying any AI tool or whatever, the values of your company, the values of your business are going to be the decision-making tool to know where to go and where to lead it. When you're training it, what does that mean? And that is, I feel, most of the time underestimated. And I do want to call that out, that you do lead with your values, because even your agents need to understand what the values of your business are.
Yeah, it's great, Amara.
Yeah. And I think with multi-agent systems coming into play, having that framework in place is more likely to absorb any shock, any risks that you're prone to face. But I'll hold my thoughts now because I know we are running out of time. Awesome. So let's summarize a little bit, Jake, shall we?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
So, we did talk about 3 different moves for the age of agentic AI. It's definitely designed for trust and returns, because unless you design for it, you're not going to be able to measure your return on investment. Modernize, start thinking about your roles in terms of outcomes and how you're going to reward that system. And ethics, a non-negotiable, and ethics that scales, that's going to be your competitive advantage.
Yeah, and if you're curious to learn and see, like the 2,500 top employers we work with all have one thing in common, and that is that they have clear visibility into the consistency of their people practices across the world. So it could be in one country they work with us, it could be in every country they work with us, in 30, 40, 50. And what that helps them do is understand, where are my practices strong? Where is data already existing that's really strong that I might be able to apply AI to more easily? And where do I need to go improve before I maybe do that, right? So if you're curious to see where you stand, you'll be receiving a free HR health check following this discussion. And then we also want to encourage you to ask questions. If you have questions for us, the Q&A is there. We don't have time to get to them right now, but we can follow up with you and get to them if you want to dive deeper or go into more. But big thank you to Amara for the conversation. Thank you all. Huge thank you for joining and listening to us. You'll receive a follow-up email in the next 24 hours. It will include a link of today's session recording. But But you'll also have access to the full report on designing work for the age of agentic AI, which you should see pop up on your screen right now. Click that link, go download the full report. It's got many more use cases, examples, and best practices. And we'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's session. So you'll get a short survey, which will appear right about now on your screen. It'll only take a couple minutes to complete. Your feedback is going to help us shape future sessions. So we're grateful for every response. We read every one. But thank you again for the time today. We hope to see you at a future session. And in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to continue the chat with Amara and I over LinkedIn, email, or otherwise. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you for more content on building a better world of work. Thanks, team.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.